Under the twin moons of Velrin, in a kingdom veiled by eternal mist and old magic, stories weren't just told, they breathed. The land held memory like a jealous lover, whispering truths into trees and folding fates into the soil. It was a realm where curses clung to bloodlines like ivy to crumbling towers, where grief could bend the air, and names carried power long after the bodies that wore them turned to ash. It was in this land that Leora was born, not of royalty but of grace. Her mother had been a forest healer, known for coaxing life from dead roots and humming stars down from the sky during childbirth. Her father, a war-weary king with sadness behind his eyes, found peace in the healer's laugh, and so Leora entered the world wrapped in love. But love in the kingdom of Velrin was a fragile thing. Leora's mother died before her daughter's first birthday. Some whispered it was a fever, others said the queen, his first wife long scorned, had woven a slow poison into her gowns. The king mourned quietly and in time married again, not for love but for alliance. His new queen, Lady Varel of the Iron Coast, came wrapped in jewels and quiet fury. She bore no children. She gave no warmth. Varel hated Leora from the moment she saw her. Not for anything the girl had done. No. It was the way sunlight lingered too long in her curls, how flowers turned toward her without asking, how she listened more than she spoke and somehow was always heard. Leora, with her warm hands and soft voice, made people feel better just by being near them. That kind of power could not be measured by coin or crown, and Varel, who had clawed her way through courts and corridors to sit beside a king, despised what she could not control. The kingdom loved Leora. The queen pretended to. Behind closed doors though she watched the girl. Studied her. Noticed how her kindness disarmed cruelty. How her sadness made even the most hardened soldier feel shame. Varel began to fear her, not as a rival but as a prophecy. In Velrin, kindness could become legend. And legends could become threats. So, on the eve of Leora's 16th birthday, as the kingdom prepared to celebrate the girl with dances and lights and lavender cakes, Queen Varel slipped into the undercellars beneath the palace. Beneath those stones no light dwelled. Only secrets. There she called upon the death mage. His name was never spoken aloud, only drawn in blood on parchment that burned before it was read. He arrived in silence, his cloak stitched from the eyelids of the forgotten, his breath rattling like dead leaves. He asked no questions, only what price she would pay. My fertility, she whispered. What I never had, I give. The mage's smile cut his face into two kingdoms, one of rot, one of satisfaction. And the girl, he rasped. Her beauty will bring ruin. Her joy will collapse. Let her live to see everyone she loves wither. Let her spirit twist until she begs for the grave. The death mage nodded and pulled a small vial from beneath his skin, a curse, black as void, writhing like smoke. He spoke words older than trees, and the vial burst into lightless wind, spiraling through stone, slipping into the cracks of the world. It left no trail. No sound. Only silence. Above, the feast had already begun. Leora danced in circles with the palace children, laughing, twirling, catching fireflies in her braids. She wore her mother's amulet around her throat, a simple blue stone that pulsed gently with inherited magic. The queen watched from the edge of the room, her eyes sharp, her smile tight as thread pulled too hard. But something was wrong. The moment the curse reached the ballroom, the candles flickered. Not out but inward. Instead of bursting toward Leora, the black wind hesitated, curling like a question. The girl turned, paused as if sensing something. Her eyes met the queen's. And then the curse bent. The death mage, watching through shadows, gasped. Instead of embedding in the girl's spirit, the curse twisted mid-flight as though confused. It hovered, unseen by all but the silent, ancient forces in the room. Leora had no shield, no chant, no warding circle. Just a soul so uncorrupted that the curse could not find purchase. No bitterness. No vanity. No cruelty to cling to. The curse flinched. It writhed like a creature cornered, searching for its mark, and then, with a soundless hiss, it turned. It turned on the queen. Like smoke through silk, it slid beneath Varel's skin. She stiffened. No one noticed, she was too practiced. But inside the rot began. Her veins cooled. Her breath caught. Her heart missed a beat. The curse, unmoored from its intended victim, had latched onto the nearest vessel of hate, and in Varel, it found a banquet. As Leora laughed and danced and let children crown her with wildflowers, the queen felt a chill curl around her spine. She blinked and saw shadows move where none were cast. She reached for a goblet, but it slipped from her hand, crashing to the floor like a shattered omen. She forced a smile. She would try again. There would be other spells, other curses, other chances. But deep in the marrow of her bones, something had shifted. She no longer held the leash. The curse did. And it had chosen her. Not the girl of light and love, but the woman who dared to wield hate in a kingdom where magic remembered everything. And thus, in a land where stories lived longer than kings, a tale began to twist. Not of a cursed girl, but of a curse that chose. Ask ChatGPT. In the weeks after her birthday, the world began to tilt for Leora, not in some sudden dramatic collapse, but with the slow, imperceptible shift of something sacred going wrong. At first, it was little things. The palace birds, song finches she had raised from hatchlings, no longer perched near her windowsill. When she came to feed them, they fluttered away as though her hands held fire. The stable hounds, once so eager to nuzzle against her skirts, now whimpered and backed into corners when she entered the yard. Even the palace cat, a smug tabby who once slept at the foot of her bed, vanished from her chambers entirely. She told herself it was coincidence. Then came the illness. Her governess, a kind older woman named Thessa, who had been with her since childhood, collapsed during a morning lesson. One moment they were reviewing ancient glyphs, and the next Thessa's eyes rolled back and she slumped forward, her skin already burning with fever. She never recovered her full strength after that. Soon another servant, a cook's apprentice who had laughed with Leora only days before, fell ill too. His lungs drowned from the inside out. People began to notice a pattern. They didn't say anything to her, not directly. But their eyes lingered too long, their voices dipped when she entered a room. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Children were pulled gently away by cautious mothers. Even her father seemed more distant, tired, his forehead etched with worry lines he never explained. Leora watched it all and felt the weight settle over her, invisible but immense. She thought of the candles that flickered when she approached. The way plants in her room withered no matter how lovingly she tended them. She recalled how her fingertips sometimes sparked with a faint coldness when she was sad, how mirrors briefly blurred when she looked into them. She was 16, kind-hearted, and deeply afraid. And in Velrin, when things went wrong, when crops failed or shadows stretched too far, people always looked for the one who didn't quite belong. The one whose mother had come from the deep woods. The girl who glowed too brightly in moonlight. The girl who made the world feel different. Leora didn't wait for accusation. She carried it within herself. She began to withdraw. She skipped gatherings, stopped tending the gardens, and locked her doors at night. She told herself it was for their safety. If she were cursed, then distance was mercy. Her gowns hung untouched. Her books remained closed. She whispered apologies to every bee, bird, and breeze that passed her by. She stopped smiling. But while Leora faded from the palace's life, the queen began to fracture. It started in the mirrors. At first, Varel thought she was overtired. Her reflection lingered a moment too long after she turned away. Once, in the middle of brushing her hair, the glass rippled, only slightly but enough for her heart to lurch. Her eyes in the reflection did not blink when hers did. She broke that mirror. But the next one did the same. Soon, all reflective surfaces in her quarters were shrouded with velvet cloths. She no longer used silver, no longer bathed alone. The servants whispered of strange noises from her room at night, soft weeping, a scraping sound like claws on stone, the rustle of unseen fabric. Varel's handmaid once swore she heard the queen speaking in a language not heard since the old wars, her voice layered with something inhuman. Varel's skin began to pale. Not gracefully, more like candle wax left in the sun. Her veins darkened at her temples. Her lips lost color. She was rotting slowly but from within. She coughed often and without reason, and at night she would clutch her pillow to muffle the sound of it. When she slept at all, her dreams were flooded with faces, twisted, screaming eyes made of smoke. Sometimes she woke with scratches on her arms. Once she found blood in her ears. And still she told herself it was nothing more than stress. Power bore a price. That's what she had always believed. She had known magic would demand something of her, it always did. But she hadn't expected the price to be so slow, so maddening. It was like drowning in silence. And the worst part, was that no one else seemed to notice. Or rather, they noticed, but they were too afraid to speak. The palace had changed. It was subtle, but the warmth that had once defined the great stone halls now felt hollow. The candles gave less light. The corridors echoed too much. Flowers in the courtyard bloomed late or not at all. The kitchens reported sudden infestations of rot and flies, though the root cellars were pristine. Fires died faster. Mice were bolder. Servants came down with strange bruises, strange chills, strange dreams. Something in the palace had shifted. Something unseen but deeply felt. Whispers began to curl in the servants' quarters, that the princess had been marked, that the queen was unwell in more ways than one, that the royal line had offended something ancient and hungry. Priests were summoned discreetly. One was found catatonic in the stables, staring into nothing. Another refused to enter the palace gates at all. Tension hung thick in the air, like a storm that refused to break. Leora felt it every time she walked the halls, barefoot now, silent, unseen. She became a ghost in her own home, moving through marble and memory. She tried to pray but her words turned sour in her mouth. She tried to sing but her throat would catch. She began writing letters to her mother, burying them in the soil beneath her window. They never stayed buried. The wind always dug them up. One day she found her favorite dress, the blue one stitched with gold threads like falling stars, shredded in her wardrobe. Not torn by hand. As though acid had chewed it from the inside out. She didn't cry. She simply folded the remains, wrapped them in linen, and placed them under her bed. If she was cursed, then she would endure it. If the world needed her silence, then she would give it. But far above her chambers, in the tallest tower, Queen Varel stood before a mirror she hadn't dared to uncover in weeks. Her hands trembled as she pulled away the velvet cloth. She stared at her reflection, searching for her own face, and instead saw Leora. Not as she was, but as something radiant. Eyes aglow. Skin gold-lit by something divine. Varel screamed. The mirror didn't crack. It smiled. The queen's decay could no longer be hidden behind silks and silence. By midwinter, her beauty had rotted into something gnarled and unfamiliar. Her once luminous skin grew thin and dry like parchment, a map of veins sprawled beneath its surface. The roses she wore daily to scent her skin wilted faster in her presence. Her eyes, once sharp as frost, dulled, clouded with something not quite madness but not sanity either. Worse still was her magic. Queen Varel had never been a grand sorceress, but what little power she did possess, gathered from blood bonds and dark pacts, had always obeyed her. Now it betrayed her. Spells faltered mid-incantation. Candles meant to light with a snap of her fingers burst into flames or refused to burn. Glamours meant to soften her features flickered and cracked, revealing yellowed teeth and sunken cheeks beneath. She tried to hide it. She applied powders thick as plaster, wrapped herself in veils, remained indoors. Her attendants were dismissed, one by one, until she was nearly alone in the western wing of the palace. The king, still oblivious to the full extent of her unraveling, traveled off and now, political matters he claimed, though most suspected he simply needed space to breathe. It was during one of those long gray evenings, when the shadows in her chambers whispered louder than the wind, that she dared summon the death mage again. She hadn't written his name this time. There was no need. The curse lived in her veins now, she had become a vessel through which he could see. The moment she sat before her obsidian altar and whispered the old syllables, the candles dimmed and the corners of the room curled inward. He emerged from the gloom like a wound in the world. Your condition, he rasped, his voice the scrape of stone against flesh, worsens. She laughed, a bitter, brittle sound. You cursed me. No, he corrected. You cursed yourself. I ordered the spell for the girl. And the spell obeyed, he said. But she did not. Varel's hands trembled on her lap. She didn't resist it. She's no priestess. She didn't need to be. The death mage circled her slowly, observing her with those hollow, lidless eyes. The girl is, not unmarked, but uncorrupted. Her spirit reflects truth. And when truth is clean, curses find no home. They slide off like water from light. The queen flinched. She is no threat, she hissed. She is a child. She is a mirror, he said simply. And mirrors, when clear, reflect what is cast upon them. You cast rot. And it returned to you. Varel stood too quickly. Her bones cracked audibly and pain raced through her spine. There must be another way. She cannot be stronger than me. The death mage tilted his head. Do you wish her dead or do you wish yourself saved? Both. He smiled, lips thin and dry. Then try again. But know this, second curses are not like first ones. They demand more. Much more. I'll pay it, she whispered. Whatever the price. She meant it. The mage said nothing more. He left her chambers as if he had never been there at all. No footprints, no scent, no sound. Only a deepening cold in the floor where he'd stood. Varel wasted no time. She bled herself into a silver bowl, mixed her hair with dried thorns, and spat a prayer in a forgotten tongue. She did not eat or sleep. For 3 days she prepared the second curse, a brutal thing, stitched together from remnants of old war spells and banished rites. Where the first curse had been elegant, slow, this one was all rage and heat. Fire wrapped in venom. A blade meant not to torment but to break. On the fourth night she cast it. The curse rose from her hands like a black sun, jagged and hissing. It darted through the halls like a dying star, veering toward the east wing where Leora slept beneath woven quilts and lavender sachets. The queen followed it, silent and unseen, watching it pass through stone like smoke through skin. But as it reached the edge of Leora's chambers, it stopped. Hesitated. Then turned again. This time it twisted sharper, faster. Seeking not the pure but the open. Not the source of resistance but the crack in the wall. It found the boy. Prince Kalen, her own son. Leora's stepbrother. He had not feared Leora. Had not avoided her like the others. He had brought her tea in the garden and read to her when she refused to leave her room. His kindness had been small, quiet, but real. And it had made him vulnerable. The curse slammed into him as he slept. He woke screaming. The palace thundered with panic. The boy clutched his face, clawing at his eyes, begging for light. But there was none. His vision was gone. Not from any wound or illness. The healers found no scars, no clouding. His pupils were perfect. But no image reached him. His eyes had been robbed of their right to see. Varel watched from behind a curtain as her son thrashed in his father's arms, sobbing. She said nothing. Could say nothing. Her lips were numb. Her throat thick with the taste of iron and ash. This had not been the price she expected. In the quiet that followed, a deeper panic settled into the palace's bones. Servants murmured prayers in doorways. Guard captains asked if a war had been declared and no one had told them. Even the high priest, who had long refused to return after his visions, arrived unbidden at dawn, demanding to see the royal family. He never reached them. He collapsed on the steps, mouth foaming, eyes open and blank. The king began to suspect dark forces. Varel denied everything. Blamed the boy's condition on illness. Suggested the priest had been mad for years. She said all this calmly, evenly, but inside she knew. The death mage's words echoed in her skull. You cursed yourself. And now her bloodline was paying the price. Leora, in the meantime, had not even woken the night of the casting. She slept deeply, dreamlessly. When the news of Kalen's affliction reached her the next morning, she ran to his chambers barefoot, her hair tangled, her heart galloping. He reached out to her at once. I can feel your light, he said softly, blindly brushing her fingers. Even if I can't see it anymore. She cried then. For him. For herself. For something she couldn't name that was dying inside her. She knew somehow this was because of her. Not her doing, but her presence. Her existence. She had tried to disappear, to spare the ones she loved, but harm had still found them. So she vowed that morning, kneeling beside Kalen's bed, that she would never again be passive in her suffering. She would understand what haunted her. She would find its name. And the queen, standing beyond the chamber walls, listening to her son whisper warmth to the girl she had tried twice to destroy, felt something rupture inside her. Not rage. Not jealousy. Terror. For the second time her curse had missed its mark. And for the first time she understood. The magic was no longer hers to wield. It had begun to choose. And it had chosen to punish the hand that cast it. The air around her whispered. Not Leora's name. But her own. Again and again. Varel. 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 The attic was barely more than a crawlspace hidden behind a panel in the east tower. It smelled of moths and forgotten time, filled with the kind of stillness that clung to silence like skin to bone. Leora had never known of it until the wind called her there. She'd been sleepwalking again, or so she thought. But her feet moved with purpose, and her hand found the hidden latch beneath the old tapestry of a weeping willow. The moment she touched the latch, she felt it, warmth as though something inside recognized her. The door opened with a sigh. Inside were trunks of old linens, a cracked mirror covered in dust, and a single box wrapped in black velvet ribbon. It was no bigger than a bread loaf and tucked into the farthest corner as if it were ashamed to be seen. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside, beneath layers of faded rose petals, lay a diary bound in midnight blue leather. The cover bore a sigil she'd seen once before, a crescent moon cradling a thorned heart. Her birth mother's seal. Leora's hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was delicate yet firm. Her mother's words danced across the page like someone whispering through time. To my daughter, should she ever need to know the truth. She read through the night. The pages spoke of joy and sorrow, of falling in love with a king, of the slow creeping fear that followed her into motherhood. But more than that, they spoke of a gift, a shield of the heart, a magic not learned but inherited. Born from a line of women whose love was so deep, it bent the very nature of dark magic. We do not cast spells. We redirect them. We do not attack. We reflect. In our blood is a mirror. The more light we hold, the more darkness breaks against us. But beware, child. This gift protects, yes, but it also condemns those who curse you to taste their own poison. We are not cursed. But neither are we harmless. Leora read those words until they etched themselves into her soul. She hadn't survived the queen's curse out of chance. She hadn't resisted it through will alone. Her very being had turned it away, had twisted it back. She was a mirror. And the queen, full of venom, had only seen her own face in return. Still there were questions. Why now? Why so violently? Could it be undone? The diary mentioned a place, an ancient marsh where her grandmother once went for answers. The Marsh of Unbinding. It lay beyond the Red Range, a place spoken of in stories used to frighten children into obedience. A swamp where truth had no skin and time had no name. The only ones who returned from it were those who entered with humility. Leora packed food, water, and the diary. She left no note, no goodbye. Only her breath on the cold window pane, fogging into the shape of a heart. The journey took 3 days by foot and memory. The path seemed to open for her, though none had walked it in decades. Forests parted. Rivers shallowed. Even the sky turned quiet. When she reached the edge of the marsh, the air grew thick with something too heavy to be mist and too soft to be smoke. It clung to her skin like forgotten sorrow. The trees were bent and weeping. Their roots curled like knuckles. She stepped inside and the world lost its edges. The crone found her before she found herself. You came with a question, the old woman rasped, emerging from a thicket of reeds. Her hair was like unraveling silk, and her eyes were pale as dead stars. I came for truth, Leora said, clutching the diary. The crone sniffed. Truth is never a gift, child. It is a weight. Are you ready to carry it? I already carry lies. I'd rather the burden be real. At that, the crone smiled, a thing made of sadness and wisdom. They sat beneath a broken willow whose branches dragged the water like mourning veils. Leora opened the diary, showed the words, spoke of her birth mother's warnings. The crone listened with hands folded and eyes closed. Yes, she murmured. Your line is true. Mirrors all of you. And the cleaner the mirror, the more violently it returns what's cast. So I didn't deflect the curse? No, the crone said. You reflected it. It chose the queen because she cast it in hate. That is the rule of your blood. The hate came back to her tenfold. Then why is it still growing? Why does she keep unraveling? Because she refuses to stop hating, the crone whispered. You are no longer the target. But the curse has made her its home. And curses, child, do not like to be evicted. Leora stared into the water. Her reflection shimmered, wavered. It looked older than she felt. Not tired, just aware. Is there a way to end it? There is always a way. But it requires something you may not be willing to give. What? Mercy. Leora blinked. You want me to spare her? No. I want you to free her. There's a difference. The crone leaned close, breath scented with myrrh and rot. You carry the key, girl. Not through spells. Through sorrow. Through love. If you open the cage, the curse will fly. It will not kill her. But it will leave her empty. Hollow. And if I don't? She will burn from within. It will be slow. Cruel. She will try to take you with her. And others. Innocents. Leora's chest tightened. Then she wins. No, the crone said. She has already lost. You are choosing what kind of loss it will be. Leora wept then. Not for herself. Not even for the queen. But for the weight of choice. For being the one born with the power to save or sentence. For the love that still, somehow, lived in her like a stubborn ember. The crone did not comfort her. She only said, You are your mother's daughter. And her mother's before her. Leora stood at dawn. The marsh released her like a breath held too long. The diary was heavier now, not with more pages but with understanding. She knew what she had to do. Not out of vengeance. But because love, when wielded by the strong, becomes the sharpest blade. The queen had not slept in days. Her mirror, once a loyal servant of vanity, had turned traitor. It showed her no reflection now, only a roiling shadow shaped like regret. Her hands trembled as she touched the cold glass, and the silver shimmered with whispers. She lives, it murmured. She lives and you decay. The queen's chambers reeked of burnt herbs, blood ink sigils and desperation. Her once golden hair had thinned to brittle strings of gray, her beauty hollowed into something brittle and mean. The very walls recoiled from her touch. She paced in circles, eyes wild. The death mage had vanished weeks ago, consumed or fled, it didn't matter now. The curse she'd birthed refused to be tamed. It had nested in her like a serpent, coiled tight around her lungs, hissing hatred into her every breath. But she had one hope left, the origin. The girl. If she could kill Leora at the heart of the moonrise, where blood and time thinned together, she might fracture the magic, force the curse to snap back into silence. So she sent her guards with silver knives and empty hearts, and they stole Leora from the edge of the garden where she was whispering to violets. They brought her bound in chains of salt and grief. The throne room was unlit, save for a circle of candles surrounding a blackened rune carved deep into the stone. The queen stood barefoot, her palms slit open, blood streaming like ink from a dying pen. Leora was forced to kneel within the circle. "You don't understand," the queen said, her voice cracking like old ice. "It was never meant for you. You were the crack in the mirror. You were never supposed to survive." Leora looked up, unafraid. Her face bore no hatred. Only sadness. "You wanted me broken," she said softly. "But I bet. And you couldn't stand it. You think love will save you?" the queen shrieked. "You think kindness is a shield? It's weakness. It's rot dressed in lace." "No," Leora said. "Love is what you feared. It's what you never learned to hold." The queen screamed, raising her blade, a twisted dagger forged from bone and shadow. She plunged it toward Leora's chest. And stopped. Because Leora did not flinch. She did not cry out or recoil or scream. She opened her arms. And she whispered, "I forgive you." The blade trembled. The rune beneath her feet hissed, curling like scorched paper. The candle screamed. The queen staggered backward as if struck, dropping the dagger. Her body shook violently, her mouth frozen in a soundless gasp. "You don't get to forgive me," she spat, clutching her head. You're not supposed to." But it was too late. The curse felt it. The fracture in its host. The mercy. And it recoiled. It shrieked, not as a voice but as wind, fire, broken glass, 1,000 dying screams collapsing into one. The queen fell to her knees, clawing at her chest. From her skin, shadows bled, streams of black tar and smoke, pouring from her mouth, her eyes, her ears. They spiraled around the chamber like a cyclone of agony, slamming into the walls, clawing at the ceiling, looking for escape. But the circle was sealed. And Leora, still kneeling, whispered again. "I grieve for the girl you once were. And the woman you refused to become." The shadows screamed once more, and imploded. The queen froze. Her body cracked, not like stone but like paper scorched at the edges. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, just one heartbeat, there was a flicker of something human. Fear. Regret. Maybe even longing. And then she crumbled. Not like a corpse, but like something never meant to be whole. Her body collapsed into a heap of pale gray dust, flecked with salt and the faint glimmer of starlight. A wind moved through the palace then, unseen but undeniable. The air sighed as though a weight long held had finally lifted. Tapestries settled. The stones exhaled. The curse was gone. Leora remained in the circle, trembling. Not from fear but from sorrow. She bowed her head and wept, not for the queen's death but for her emptiness. For all the years wasted in bitterness. For the wounds she passed forward, and the love she buried too deep to reach. She stood slowly, unshackled now, salt chains crumbling like brittle leaves. The guards who had brought her had long since fled. No one else remained. Only her breath and the dust, and the silence of a throne without a queen. She did not touch the ashes. She let them lie. As she walked from the chamber, light returned to the stained glass above. The rose window, long dulled by curse and sorrow, shimmered with gold. Sunlight pierced through for the first time in years. And outside the garden bloomed. The change did not come all at once, like some loud miracle or thundercrack transformation. It came in soft mornings, in winds that no longer carried the scent of rot, in the laughter of birds returning to branches long thought dead. The curse had died with the queen, but its grip had lingered in the walls and waters, in the quiet despair of the people. Yet now, inch by inch, the land remembered how to breathe. Rain fell for the first time in weeks, gentle and sweet. Not the biting kind that scoured the skin but a kiss on the earth. The fields, once blighted and cracked, drank deeply. Crops began to peek from the soil, shy and uncertain at first, as if asking whether it was truly safe to grow. And the people, Oh, the people stepped out from their grief like animals emerging after fire. Slowly, tenderly, they watched the palace gates, waiting to see what vengeance or power might spill from them next. But it was not a queen who came forth. It was a girl with dirt under her nails and flowers braided in her hair. Leora refused the crown the elders offered her. I do not wish to sit on a throne carved from pain, she said. Let the seat be empty or let it be shared. But I will not rule from above. Instead, she asked for space at the edge of the old palace gardens, overgrown, wild, tangled with weeds and thistle. She cleared it with her own hands. Planted rows of herbs for healing, fruit trees for nourishment, wildflowers for beauty. She invited the children to help, teaching them the language of seeds, the meaning of roots. Where once there was sorrow, laughter took root. The people watched with wonder as the girl they once feared became their teacher, their healer, their soft revolt. She did not issue laws. She told stories. She did not raise armies. She taught the young how to hold a sick bird without fear. Her stepbrother, though blind, returned from exile when the message reached him. He wept upon hearing the queen was gone, not out of joy but exhaustion. And he too declined power. I cannot see the path, he told the people, but I can feel its direction. Let us walk it together. With Leora's guidance, he helped reshape the kingdom's council. No longer a nest of greedy voices, it became a circle: farmers, weavers, sages, and healers. Those who built, not broke. Those who listened before they ruled. It was not swift work, but it was sacred. The people called it the Quiet Revolution, not marked by banners or bloodshed, but by the planting of trees, the repair of roofs, the singing of lullabies where once there had been screams. And with it came a new tradition. Each year, on the evening the queen once called the Night of Dominion, the people gathered instead in the village square. They brought ash from their hearths and wildflowers from the fields. They painted their faces with soot and petals. They danced not to forget but to remember. They called it the Festival of Ashes and Flowers. Children were told the tale of the girl who was cursed but would not curse back. Of a queen who broke herself trying to break another. Of how love, even when wounded, could still mend the world. Candles were lit in silence for those lost. Songs were sung for those who chose gentleness over power. And in every corner of the kingdom, a garden bloomed in her name. Not grand monuments or marble statues, but living things tended with care. Leora never attended the festivals openly. She watched from a distance, smiling at the glow of hope rekindled in the eyes of children. Once, a little girl tugged on her sleeve near the edge of the garden. Are you her? The girl asked. The storm girl? Leora smiled. I was once. What are you now? She knelt beside her, brushing a curl from the girl's cheek. Just a gardener. But the wind that moved through the trees seemed to disagree. It whispered her name through the leaves, soft as memory, strong as myth. And so the kingdom bloomed. Not through decree but through devotion. Not through rule but through roots. And the people at last remembered how to live. They spoke of her in voices low as candlelight. Not because they feared her but because her name had become something sacred, like breath, like seed, like storm. In the kingdom that once cursed her, Leora had become 1,000 stories stitched into the hearts of 1,000 strangers. Every version carried truth. Every version held myth. She had become, in the eyes of the world, both girl and legend, neither wholly one nor the other, and far more than either alone. Some said the curse had fallen in love with her. That it had been birthed with poison in its belly and hatred in its bones, but the moment it touched Leora's spirit, something inside it faltered. That the curse, so dark and cruel by design, had tasted her compassion and refused to feed. That it had hovered over her like a storm ready to strike and instead, curled around her like mist, uncertain, reluctant, undone. Others said the curse was never evil. That curses were mirrors, not monsters. That it had only ever reflected what the queen had feared most. Her own decay, her own emptiness. Leora, pure and radiant, had merely illuminated what was already breaking. And the curse, sensing no shadow in Leora to cling to, turned backward like a snake eating its own tail. There were those who believed Leora had known all along, that her stillness was not ignorance but defiance. That her silence in the face of cruelty had not been weakness, but a sword. That she had wielded love like a weapon sharper than steel. There were so many versions. One painted her as a saint. Another a witch. Still another, a goddess who had chosen to be born in a girl's body for a single generation to undo the rot of a dying world. But only one story, all soft-footed, quietly told, remembered her simply as she was, a girl who had suffered deeply, survived gently, and left quietly. After her stepbrother's death, Peaceful in sleep, many years after the kingdom's quiet restoration, Leora was seen less and less. She spoke at his burial, kneeling by his stone with her hand pressed to the soil, whispering thanks. Then she rose, touched the shoulders of the children he had mentored, and walked toward the forest's edge without a single word of goodbye. No one followed. They understood, in the silent way people sometimes do, that she had already given all she came to give. And so she vanished. No grave marks her resting place. No relic bears her name. But wildflowers bloom where she once wept. They grow in impossible places, stone cracks, rooftops, the hollows of burned trees. They carry no name, yet those who see them know. The petals glow faintly when moonlight strikes. They smell like rain and ash and something older than hope. Parents tell their children, if you ever feel lost, find her flowers. They remember the way. Some believe she walks still in dreams. That if your sorrow is honest and your heart remains soft, she may appear in the night, not to fix you but to witness you. To hold your story in her hands like a flame and say, you do not have to become what hurt you. In certain villages, girls gather in circles during storms and say her name 3 times, not to summon her, but to remember that rage can be sacred. That forgiveness is not surrender. That survival is not silence. Once a year, in the deepest part of the forest, an invisible path reveals itself, lined with Leora's flowers. The bravest pilgrims follow it, hearts pounding, feet bare. They say it leads to a single clearing where the trees hum and the air sings. In the center, a pool of still water, said to reflect not your face but your truest self. None who have visited that place speak of what they see. They only return changed, quieter, gentler, fiercer. The festival of ashes and flowers still thrives generations later. But now, at its end, when the petals begin to dry and the fire turns to embers, one final story is told. A story whispered by elders to the youngest, as stars bloom above them. A story of a girl who was cursed by her stepmother. But the curse chose a different victim. And in that choosing, the world changed.